Some bro. Hey, good morning, everyone. How at thou? All right. So I'm trying to get the best possible angle. At least make I look like fine boy. Wait on, I think we'll catch our mirth where we can find it in a place with very little joy. So where art thou? Right now, usually you guys will be popping. I know you can hear me, and I see that some of you are already here. But I do love the interaction of being able to. This is quite interesting. So let me see who's here. Good morning, Jerry, Kayode, Kunle, and you too. If I see you. Bad now. You just want to make I sit down, begin they vibrate like radio. And not be radio. May we day together. You day with me, just day with me. Maybe. So good morning, everyone. This is better. Now I see you. Now I know you're here. Now I know we can start our day. You know, one of the things we lack as a people is institutional memory. And this lack of institutional memory has done a lot to not only damage us as a people, but it has left us in a place where we seem to learn nothing from our history. So we moved on from bring back our girls. The outrage of Buniyadi happened where the terrorists went to a secondary school and slaughtered over 50 children. It happened, Bama happened. Outrages have become normalized, so we have developed a culture of forgetfulness because our reality does not even allow us the capacity to retain the memory of yesterday's outrage. Because if we retain the memories of yesterday's outrage, today will become crazy. We're already so it's almost impossible to retain your sanity in this place, and you really shouldn't, because if you retain your sanity in this place, it becomes the proof of your insanity. So now let's get to the point. I'm saying all of this because of the children that still remains with the terrorists in Ogbomoso. I say this because of them. We can't afford to forget that there are children, 46 people in the hands of terrorists in the forest. These are terrorists who have already displayed a capacity for murderous instincts. They've done it. They slaughtered a man on camera just to prove a point. But they have children. It's been raining. It's been raining cat and dog for weeks. And these children have been with the terrorists for weeks. And instead of focusing attention on this, the same people who are busy promoting bringing back girls, they've conveniently forgotten these people. We've moved on to talking about akara business, kuli business. That was in the week that was. That was actually one of the things we were talking about in the week that was, whilst children were in the custody of terrorists. We were talking, believe it, as a country, we were speaking about kuli, frying akara, the giants of Africa. Nigeria is not just a tragedy for the victims of Nigeria. Nigeria is a tragedy for the African continent because it is holding back the entire race. In the country that is meant to be the engine room for the emergence of the African people, we're talking about roasting corn. We're talking about frying akara. At a national level, we elevated nonsense in the week that was, but that is not my purpose this morning. In the week that was, I don't know when the young man gave the interview that has provoked a debate. He tagged it, he identified what he called the Olodo uprising. In the week that was, at least that was when I saw it for the first time. And I laughed. not because I found anything funny, but because the young man, and I think my gray hairs qualify me to call him a young man. The young man was identifying something in his time, but he was seeing the latter stage of something that had started in my own generation when I was probably his age. And what was this thing? I spoke about weaponized ignorance for the first time in 1994 when I wrote a piece for what was then the AM newspaper. I identified weaponized ignorance, which has battered weaponized poverty, being promoted by the Nigerian state, then under General Abacha, against the Nigerian people. It is not person-based. It is a systemic decision to impoverish the people, but they started it with weaponized ignorance. The young man is identifying the same phenomenon, but what he's seeing is the byproduct, which is the elevation of idiocy at a mass level, which has led to the stupefaction of an entire state. Nigerians are painfully ignorant, painfully. And the painful thing about the ignorance is the willfulness of the ignorance, because when you present these persons with facts, verifiable facts, they dismiss these facts because it could not pass through the filter of their ethnic, religious, or partisan biases. Almost as if their refusal to accept the truth invalidates the truth. And then we are all harvesting the product of this Olodo uprising. But Olodo uprising was fathered by weaponized ignorance, which is a tool deployed against the Nigerian by the Nigerian state itself. That is to deal with that. In the week that was, the Senate passed the state police bill. You know, the most dangerous thing about Tinubu is that he will give you shadows. It's not the system was not designed by Tinubu, but the system is already sufficiently criminal that it has become a tool for impunity rather than a tool for the promotion of citizens' rights, democracy, or rule of law. So you have the person that best understands how to operate a system of impunity at the pinnacle of governmental office in Nigeria. And what he is doing is very simple. You've asked for state police. I'm in full support of the idea. You're getting the state police. But who and who sat down to draft that bill? One of the senators was busy complaining about the process of its passage. How even he, a senator, did not see the bill until it was brought to the floor of the Senate. If the senator can complain, who am I? What am I supposed to say? What are you supposed to say? Or we live in a democracy that is dictated by the wills or whims and caprices of persons who will one day come out into the public space to talk about the existence of an agency or its non-existence, an agency that has clear line items in the budget, an agency that was given almost 28 billion as takeoff grant, an agency where the person who is said to have not be the head of an agency. Look, we're dealing with a country that has gone completely to the dogs, being run largely by incompetent criminals. Because where else would you have a situation where somebody will come out and be saying that he paid 400 million to get his appointment to be the head of a presidential council that the chief of staff is denying exists? This is madness on an industrial scale. And if we didn't have an uprising of Olodo uprising, if we didn't have that, if the citizenry of victims had not been sufficiently stupefied, this should be what is occupying our attention. These are the things we should be demanding answers to. But as I've told you, the week that was is always a window into what is happening in our country. It's not my focus. Those who blog have done sufficient work to deal with these things. They talk about them to titillate you in most cases, but I am talking about them just to open the window so that you see the country that you are living in, the level of impunity that governs it, the incompetence of the criminals running the criminal organization itself, the wickedness by which they deal with the people. These are the reasons for me speaking to the week that was. I could deal with these things in the body of my lecture, but it wouldn't do justice to it because it would not. Please, I'm saying this thing and I need to deal with it once and for all. Let nobody be ascribing some stupid office to me, EFCC, the EFCC chairman, the attorney general. I desire none because no office, no personnel change is going to change this stupid country of ours. Stop ascribing things to persons until all of us as a collective get it into our head. If you made people assign persons that you think are your saints, assign them to offices in Nigeria today without reforming the governance system, which can only be done when all of you are mobilized to demand it. Nobody in power today in Nigeria is desirous of changing anything in the system because the system works perfectly for those in government. Stop ascribing stupid offices. I'm not interested. Let's focus on our issue. Please, point is this. In this week that was, they said they deregistered the NDC. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. The only thing I'll tell you is this. You already have an electoral system spearheaded by a card-carrying member of the APC. Whether he's holding the card or not, he has declared his affiliation beyond argument. He didn't even have the restraint to stay out of the public space in doing so. He is the head of INEC. Yakubu, who even labored to make you believe that he wasn't partisan, was brutally, venally corrupt in his administration of the 2023 election. And you actually believe that Amukpiton. We will actually use him to describe history because that's the full name of his story, of his name, Amukpiton, the one by which tales are told. We'll tell tales of whatever he does or does not do in that office. But you will be the idiots and the fools if you believe for 1 second that these people are prepping for an election. Whether they registered the NDC or deregistered the NDC, it matters little. Your own readiness to stand behind whatever you decide to vote, however you choose to vote, and ensuring the credibility of that electoral process, that is all that concerns me. But that they are assuring you of this, assuring you of that, all those ones are farcical gyrations, and you do well to look beyond it. Focus on the credibility of your electoral process, the integrity of your vote, and then you can talk. But all that is not achievable when you have someone like, within they call him, Amukpiton, heading your INEC. Justice Crack was here to see me during the week that was here yesterday. He's a young man full of courage. I commend the same mindset to all of you. You will die only once, but you know the beautiful power of the whole thing. If you died for the truth, if you died a life, having lived a life of purpose, you actually never die. You gain immortality. He was with me yesterday. I salute his courage. He gave me another vista into the Nigerian state in recounting his experiences with the Nigerian army, his subsequent transfer to the DSS, and his venture judicial ordeal. Nigeria stinks to high heaven. Yele, was sent to prison in the week that was. My Sango remained in prison. I'll borrow a minute from those of you who are just joining us. I know it's 10 o'clock, but I need to conclude this. I can't make it a footnote. I need to speak to the various detentions before I go into the body of my lecture this morning. And even if this will need to be a standalone so that I might be able to cut it and put it out on social media so that we all get it clear. So you may call it a special announcement. Nigeria has never been a state ruled by law, but there has usually been a pretense that we're a democracy. So in keeping up this delusion or this illusion of a democracy, the state had occasion to pretend that it is governed by law. And the victims, at least those who are aware, those of us who know exactly what we are dealing with, we have sought to equally pretend so that we may function with some sanity remaining like we're a democracy. So we've both been playing this hide and seek. But I've noticed that in recent time, the state appears to be forgetting the script. My Sango was arrested, abducted, I should actually say, and has been kept with the DSS for weeks. What are his offenses, if any? Why hasn't he been charged to court? Why should it be all right for the state security services to just summarily pick up somebody and lock them up? On what basis? If you say that there is a valid court order, why not publish it? If there are crimes that have been committed, why not charge him? If you are still investigating, why are you depriving him of his liberty? That is one facet of the criminal state. The second facet, Yele Sowore has been validly taken through a legal process that curiously has him remanded in prison custody even after the judge was asked to recuse himself from the case. Why was it that he could not continue to enjoy the same bail as he was prior to the application to have the judge recuse? Why? If you are wondering why, look no further. El-Rufai, I detest the midget of Kaduna, but he is governed by the same laws and the same systems that governs me and that governs you. For months now, El-Rufai has been locked up. And then you gave bail conditions that are patently impossible to meet, weaponizing the judicial system to punish. Let us be clear. When the law ceases being, when the courts or the judiciary ceases to be the last hope of the common man, what happens invariably is that the judiciary becomes the weapon of choice in the hand of the tyrant. And this is what is happening in Nigeria. Please let us be clear. This continuous derogation of rights is an invitation to anarchy. The state needs to be careful not to provoke the people. I am asking, please, nicely now, Akuku can't fight. I don't get guns now, I get the guns. Free these detainees because that's all they are. Yele has no business in your custody. My Sango definitely has no business being detained by you or anyone else. I'm talking about the DSS now. And most definitely, if El-Rufai has committed crimes, charge him to court, try him properly. But this one that you are doing, let's be clear, is persecution. And you're turning a villain into a saint in popular folklore. Enough said. I apologize very deeply that I ran over that time, but I had important housekeeping to deal with. Before I go into the subject of my lecture this morning, let me pretend I'm a lecturer. I would like to clarify something. The entire purpose of my assertion at all time is to lead us to a point where we come to the understanding that it would require collective action by all of us to take us to the point of liberation, because ours is not a pro-democracy struggle. is a liberation struggle. So when you see me speaking, pretend that I'm either your imam or your pastor. The thematic preoccupation of both, and all religion for that matter, is to attend to your spiritual needs, and in Nigerian cases, to fleece you and take from your pocket. My purpose is to get you incensed sufficiently, informed sufficiently, conscientized sufficiently to the point where you rebel and then seek a better country for yourselves and for your children. Let's get this clear before we set out. That's what I've sought to do. So this morning, to link it to what I just explained, I want us to examine what I believe to be the ultimate solution to the Nigerian palaver. You know, the one thing about populists is that they tend to have simple solutions for complex problems. And when they bring simple solutions for complex problems in a society where you have the olodo uprising, you find very quickly that the olodos who preponderate in that space would latch on to the simple ideas floated by populists. So when you are confronted with the Nigerian conundrum, it's very easy to believe that the solution is a division of Nigeria into ethnic nations, and then there will be peace and El Dorado. That has been the usual simple solution, and it is very simple. Now, when you begin to interrogate the simple solutions, you find very quickly that the conundrum becomes evident, because what was seemingly simple is actually deeply complex by the time you get to the nitty-gritty. But before I proceed too far, because if I say something is the ultimate solution, they will say, why is it that nobody else has thought of it? If you are saying it's the ultimate solution, it's the magic bullet that kills this problem, that resolves this problem. Me, I'm not the depository of knowledge. I'm not the only wise man, and I am not presuming to know it all. But if I say it's the ultimate solution to the Nigerian palaver, what is the Nigerian palaver? Let's start with definitions. The word palaver has comes from the Latin root parabola. It went into Portuguese, it became palavia. See that palavra? When the Portuguese began to explore the west coast of Africa, when they came into contact with us, remember, since maybe the 17th century, the Benin Kingdom had been sending ambassadors to Portugal, to Lisbon, to the court of Lisbon. So there was this long relationship. So palaver came out of that relationship. And what does it mean? It means speech, pali. When people of different languages and civilization, custom, are seeking to negotiate trade, because they are trade. Remember, neither understood each other's language. So communication was actually quite problematic. So the difficult process of talking to each other, the unnecessary elaborate negotiations, the complicated procedures, which, if you know your history, was part of what led to the British Benin War, because the British simply did not understand Benin custom. So those kind of frictions, those kind of difficulties was what led the Portuguese to be talking about palavra. Now, palavra, as I have explained, is what came into the Nigerian space. Anyway, it became a language used largely by explorers. The English adopted it as well. It entered the English language as palaver. You can spell it as P-A-L-A-V-E-R or P-A-L-A-V-A. So palaver came into the Nigerian or the English language. It became part and parcel of the lexicon. But how does it relate to us? It relates to us because before Nigeria was turned into this Catholic marriage that has been forced on everybody, before Nigeria became a place where somebody will sit in Abuja and be dictating what happens in what is supposed to be a federation. Before any of these, we had many palavers, difficult discussions. We had many palavers. We didn't get to 1960 without troubles. We had troubles, we had palavers, we talked. The first Catholic marriage of today, of a diverse people with different agendas, cultures, ambitions, and vision. It didn't happen like this. We had different palavers. My mother has an analogy. She is one to say that she could live with mad persons in a compound. If you're familiar with the face me, I slap you. I grew up in my family, my maternal grandfather's compound in Ibadan. Large compound, multiple families living in the same space, but there were rules, and persons understood rules, and persons respected rules, and persons maintained peace. So my mother would usually say that she could live with a mad person, provided that the mad person understood the boundaries of the relationship. So mad persons, and make no bones about it, there were mad persons. They came together after the Richard Constitution of 1946, and they were touting the idea of independence, and they were touting the idea of a Nigerian state, because it was not always intended to be one. It could have been three, it could have been more. Persons were convinced to stay as one after multiple palavers. The first of those palavers took place in Ibadan, and this was in 1950, because there were consistent protests against the 1946 Richards Constitution. Because that constitution sought to centralize governance in Nigeria, in fact, not almost, it centralized governance in Nigeria. The regions were mere administrative centers that could do nothing on their own. They always had to go back. So the Ibadan Constitutional Conference was convened in 1950. That Constitutional Conference started the idea of federalism in Nigeria because it was a direct rejection of unitarism and centralization of the administration of the state that was emerging. It led to the 1951 Macpherson Constitution, which established the three regions and the House of Rep. The second of those palaver was the London Constitutional Conference of 1953. That was triggered by a Nauru's motion for self-governance by 1956, which caused a lot of problems because the North resisted that. They were booed out of Lagos. You might have heard the story. And the MPC delegation swore they were not coming back. In order to resolve the stalemate, there was a conference held in the UK. It was in London. It's popularly called the Lancaster House Conference. And this conference was chaired by the Colonial Secretary, Oliver Lyttelton. It was decided in this place, in that conference, that Nigeria must become a true federation. So see that hyperbole of true federation did not come about in contemporary time. It's always been with us, because there was always a force that preferred domination to cooperation. So the squabble that palaver of 1953 resolved that Nigeria must be a true federation with regional autonomy, and regional autonomy was expanded, and that regions that desire self-governance could have it. The Lagos Constitutional Conference of 1954 was called to iron out, okay, so maybe we have issues here and there in the operation of the agreements that came out of the London Constitutional Conference. Let's look at it so that we iron it out. And they did that. And that was what eventually crystallized into the Lithuanian constitution, and that constitution formally regionalized the civil service and the judiciary. So the judiciary was not one that was controlled by a national judicial council that will be appointing judges for the regions, unlike now, where the appointment of judges are centralized. It was clearly agreed, let each region run its own judiciary. And then you have the Federal Appeal Court, and then you had the Supreme Court. So we had palavers, difficult talks. We discussed these things. It was in that place that Lagos was removed from the Western region and made the Federal Capital Territory. This wasn't something that Obafemi Awolowo was happy about, but it was the decision taken so that everybody else would feel at home in Lagos. That was why Ikeja remained part of the Western region, largely. That's why places like Mushin, part of what is Lagos State today, remained part of the Western region, but the Federal Capital Territory was clearly excised and rendered independent of the Western region. This was done out of the palaver, the discussions. There were Lagosians who were opposed to the idea of the Western region retaining control of Lagos, who promoted the idea of a Federal Capital Territory. It was not something that was forced down anybody's throat. These were products of palavers, talks, difficult discussions, agreements that were reached, compromises that were made. It established the derivation principle for the allocation of revenue. If the revenue was generated in your region, you retain the majority portion based on the derivation principle. It prepared Nigeria for independence. It also agreed that the Eastern region and the Western region could have immediate self-governance if they wanted. This conference was holding, remember, in July 1957. By August, Eastern region, Western region declared internal self-governance by agreement, by palaver. Did not do so until 1959. But their refusal to do so, or their reluctance to do so, based on their own internal calculations, did not restrain others who wanted it from getting it. That was the Nigeria that was resolved by the palavers. Have you counted how many constitutional conferences? 4, beginning from the 1950, one in Ibadan. That same conference created the position of the Prime Minister. That was what led to Tafawa Balewa's appointment as the Prime Minister. There was no Prime Minister prior to this time. It recommended the establishment of a Senate. That Senate was established in 1959 in preparation for independence in 1960. That Senate was not elected, it was appointed, 12 from each region. Nnamdi Azikiwe was the first Senate president, later became the Governor General at independence. That conference set up the Willings Commission of Inquiry into the rights of the minorities based on their concerns. And then there was a continuation in Lagos in 1958. This was called to tidy up loose ends before independence. It was also meant to review the findings of the Willings Commission of Inquiry into the rights of the minorities. The Willings Commission rejected applications to set up new regions, but it did recommend that a Bill of Rights for the protection of minority rights should be enshrined into the Independence Constitution. This was done. It said they should leave creation of regions until after independence, but the mechanism for creation was in the document that had been produced by the multiple palavers over the years. The people who were meeting are the ones who are said to be the architect of Nigeria. They were building a country based on their understanding of the country that they were inheriting from the British. They had institutional checklists. They built guardrails. They built protections both for ethnic nationalities, minorities. They built a state based on the palavers, the difficult discussions that they had leading up to independence. They had these difficult arguments. Each side could not have its way. Agreements and compromises were formed. It was that document that became the Independence Constitution. And we kept talking even after independence. Remember what the Willings Commission report had said? We will leave creation of additional regions until after independence. You know what they did? After independence, the Midwestern region was created through more palavers. First, they passed the motion in the Regional Assembly in Ibadan. That motion agreed that it passed by 2/3 that there should be a Midwestern region. They went and conducted a plebiscite. They did economic survey. They did the vote. The people affected voted. It passed by an overwhelming majority. A motion was taken before the Federal House of Representatives in Lagos. It passed by overwhelming majority. Each time it required 2/3 majority, not the kind of 2/3 you are seeing in our Senate and House of Reps now, where people are lying about 2/3 when they cannot even establish quorum and they are supposedly passing landmark legislation, changing the fraudulent constitution fraudulently. You have a situation. It's not my fault that I'm sweating like a Christmas goat. It's NEPA. And I can't even get up to go and put on my AC because I'm already in this. So, thank you. Let's all enjoy it together. So, you have a situation where by 1962, the Midwestern region had been created through multiple palavers. And when they were done with these different palavers, you know what they did? They gazetted the creation of the Midwest region. Nigeria, from 3 regions, became 4 by palaver. That palaver which they failed to resolve by speech, resulted in the coup of 1966 January. The unresolved palaver of January became a second coup in July. And then the Civil War, which was very uncivilized, multiples died. And that was the beginning of the emergence of the alien states, which is where we are today. So if I'm saying that there is an ultimate solution to the Nigerian palaver, what I'm saying is very simple. Those who purportedly founded Nigeria, both the British and the so-called founding fathers, in their wisdom, looking at the foundational issues, came to agree that Nigeria should be a federation. They agreed that the regions should be self-governing, autonomous, and able to grow at their own pace. But by the end of the Civil War, and before I even go to the Civil War, I should talk about the Aburi Accord. When the different palaver had now become a proper palaver, and just before the beginning of the Civil War. An attempt was made at finding peace, and a palaver was called for Aburi. General Ankara chaired it to mediate between the federal forces and the eastern region. They shook hands because people believed that the palaver in Aburi had resolved the palaver in Nigeria. And what was the palaver in Aburi? It was essentially a return to federalism, a demand that the regions be independent. It wasn't a secessionist break. It was a demand for strong regional government, a limitation of federal powers. The rationale for the July coup was the supposed unitarization of Nigeria by Ironsi. But people tend to forget that given the military command structure, Ironsi or anyone leading Nigeria in the absence of democracy has no choice but to run Nigeria in a unitary fashion. So the same thing that was used to legitimize the murder of Ironsi, Fajui, and others in July was what was being resisted when the Aburi Accord was repudiated. Simplicity. Now, you've repudiated the Aburi Accord. We've had the Civil War or Uncivil War. Civil War is done. Now we are here, we are. Where are we today? Nigeria has become a country of 36 states. If it is truly a federation, that means you have 36 federating units. How many of these federating units are economically viable? Remember, I told you when they were creating the Midwestern region, an economic survey was carried out. It was determined that that region was capable of paying its own overhead, developing and contributing to the national purse. It was determined that the ethnic nationalities there are able to live together peacefully. The rigorous process that began in 1961 ended in 1963 with the gazetting. But military thieves, crooks and bandits, people like Obasanjo, Babangida, Abacha, they sat down and they were creating just this exact same thing done at the Berlin conference without consultation with the victims. They are drawing up states within a state whose legality is already in question because of the repudiation of original agreements. We've ended up today with 36 states. Each and every one of the foundational agreements have been repudiated, rejected, destroyed, discarded, denied. And that is why we are where we are today. Because in the absence of the negotiated agreement, what has happened is that Nigeria today has become a feudal state. That feudal state is an alien state. Fela sang about it earlier in his inimitable style. I think it was where we tend to call that song Alaji Alaji, where he said, "Na Alaji is the rulers, strangers are governing us. They are not related to us." That an example of the fact that they are not related to us is the one where you are being told to come and take money to fry akara, kuli kuli, roast corn. If that person frying akara, kuli kuli, and roast corn, if the child has ordinary typhoid, that child is dead. Talk less of diabetes or the woman herself having hypertension because there is no there. So just for you to understand the disconnect, the point is that today, in the absence of the multiple palavers that produce an agreement that has today been destroyed, what you have is a system that is not amenable to the rule of law because it has become feudal. The rulers must be above the law, and that is where we are. The judiciary cannot provide justice because it cannot enforce laws. If it enforces law, the state will collapse. So the ultimate solution to all of this is a return to the original agreements. Nigeria must return to its federalist root. Nigeria must truly become a federation. In the absence of this, it will die. So, when I say to you that there is an ultimate solution, that ultimate solution ultimately is a return to root. Federalism, parliamentary governance, the independence of the judiciary, which can only enforce by the rule of law. Now, I have looked at the political process and I have seen multiple candidates and parties, even persons that I deem competent and persons who can add value to the Nigerian state. I have not seen anyone presenting a plan to the Nigerian people. You may present plans within conclaves, but I believe that the only way to move this needle is to get the people themselves involved to the point where they understand the changes that are required and where they are the ones who are standing behind the changes they need. So, one of the reasons why I've chosen this topic for myself this morning is because I need us to engage with the draft constitution that we have placed in the public space. That draft constitution places a plan on the table where he's explaining that Nigeria should be governed along a 6 regional structure that acts back to the original agreement and that says very clearly that Nigeria should have not just strong regions, but inside that constitution must be the right to secession 10 years after his operation. Now, note this. We are not proposing that we're not proposing that you call a sovereign national conference. We're saying put this on the ballot. Let the people know from day one that this political platform, if it gains power, this is the structure it intends to place on the table. Now, if you have campaigned with this constitution, if you have campaigned and placed these changes on the ballot for the people to decide, there is no need for a sovereign national conference if you should win power, because the people already knew what they were voting for from day one. That is the true Nigerian revolution. If you're looking for a bloodless revolution, you are going to need to place the agenda for change on the ballot for the people to decide if they want a continuation of this madness or if they are prepared to commit themselves to change. There's no magic bullet anywhere. There's no painless revolution. You cannot outsource the revolution. You are going to have to get involved. You are going to have to get involved. There is no magic bullet. I am no Voltron. You yourself, you are no Voltron, but in the collective decision to change, we become invincible. The only way to unite you is behind a plan. There is no monopoly of wisdom here. I'm not claiming that. But we do have to figure our way out of the mess we are in. It is my own sincere belief that we should honestly pursue a return to where we started from. There were 4 regions by the time of the first coup. We are proposing 6 based on the already agreed geopolitical zones, roughly. It could be the start. There must be a way to figure our way out of this without resorting to violence. This is my own belief. Maybe if I was an FT boy, maybe if I wasn't underage when I went through school, I would have learned to rely on my strength to figure out ways out of trouble. But all I had was my brain, and I learned to figure things out. I'm believing that it is not beyond our collective capacity to figure our way out of the mess we are in. But it cannot be that we are willing to accept a normalization of kidnappings, brigandage, of a compromised army that sells arms to terrorists, that gives information to terrorists, that has brigadier generals dying like flies, a state that cannot provide security. We must be able to think our way out of our mess. These are my own thoughts. Get involved. I must confess that the loss of my PA, my assistant who was with me for years, she left late last year, has impeded my capacity to deploy some things. And I have lagged behind in dealing with the interface that should be happening as at this time. But I will try my best to ensure that if I give my word, I will make sure that before the end of the day, you've always had access to this constitution. It's already on my website, but as a standalone document, you'll find it on dailyfireultimate.com. If you type it, or draft constitution, if it's there as a standalone, you'll find it. Please download it, engage with it. We have a WhatsApp channel. We've shared the number with you. It's meant to be upgraded to a Telegram channel to accommodate more persons. I'll speak with the lady handling that, and I'll see how I can resolve these issues where we can create forums for our discussions and find ways to create cells so that we can progress some of these things as well. I apologize for the lateness of some of these things. Please bear with me. I promise to do better in relation to these communications. But do engage with the ones that are already available to you. Engage with them. Give us your opinions. We hold no monopoly of wisdom, and we are willing to learn. As we go about the rest of the week, I ask of you, remember those in different forms of custody. The Nigerian state behaves pretty much like the terrorists. It collects taxes, the terrorists collect ransom. It unlawfully incarcerates, the terrorists hold hostages. Very little difference between the state and the terrorists. Remember the children. Remember those in all forms of unlawful captivity. And pray for them if you are the praying type. I'll see you next week. God bless you. And like I said, remember the kids. God bless you all.